Welcome to Divers Alert Network's Research Operator course. To start with, we would like to give you an overview of the course. The first module provides the background on Dan Europe's research history. Module 2 focuses on the data acquisition process. The third module details the actual data collection methodology, while Module 4 looks at the ongoing research and development made possible by this data. The objective of this program is as follows. Primarily, the D-ROC is intended to teach research volunteers to independently collect and send data to the Dan Europe Research Database using Diving Safety Laboratory or Diving Safety Guardian software interfaces. Module 1. Module 1 provides an overview of Dan Europe research. In this section, we will look at the background of Divers Alert Network, how this research initiative developed from a project called Safe Dive to the permanent Dive Safety Laboratory of today, and then discuss the Dive Safety Laboratory itself and what it's all about. Show the various components of Dive Safety Laboratory, of which you are about to become part, and then review the Dan Research Operator standards and procedures as these apply to you. For those of you that may not be fully aware of the background of Divers Alert Network, we would like to provide you with a brief overview, particularly as it relates to the development of Diving Safety Laboratory. First of all, Dan Europe is a part of an international network of non-profit diving medical research organizations dedicated to the safety and health of recreational divers. Dan Europe was first established in 1983, and the core of its ongoing mission is to provide emergency access to recreational scuba divers in case of diving emergencies, to offer medical assistance, to actively prevent injuries, to promote diving safety, and to establish active research and education initiatives in order to achieve all of these objectives. Therefore, to achieve its mission, Dan provides emergency medical advice and assistance for underwater diving injuries and works to prevent injuries and promote diving safety. It also promotes and supports underwater diving research and education and strives to provide the most accurate, up-to-date and unbiased information on issues of common concern to the diving public. Throughout the world, Dan is considered the most highly trusted organization in the field of diving safety, emergency services for divers, health promotion, as well as research and education on diving safety, medicine, and physiology as it relates to recreational divers. Internationally, Divers Alert Network is made up of 5 independent regional organizations, all offering advice and assistance services to recreational divers throughout the world. Every year, our alarm centers manage more than 15,000 underwater-related emergencies. In addition, DAN's medical officers respond to thousands of medical inquiries ranging from fitness-to-dive questions to diving injuries. Presently, more than 400,000 Dan members benefit from this medical assistance and emergency service that is offered by leading experts in the field. When it comes to diving safety, however, Dan has realized that this is best assured through a close collaboration with those who are primarily interested in it. For this reason, Dan seeks to partner with the following stakeholders in diving safety: the diving industry and equipment manufacturers, diving medicine and physiology researchers as well as clinical specialists in diving medicine, dive leaders and instructors who pass on information as well as dive safety attitudes to the diving community, and lastly, the divers themselves. In order to provide an ongoing active role in achieving the mission objective, Dan Europe established a dive safety laboratory with the aim of studying the various variables that affect the safety of recreational divers. So how does Dan do this? Well, in addition to information that may be obtained by interviewing divers about diving practices and safety, the two most important components in assessing diving-related exposure and decompression stress are the electronic dive profile and post-diving related venous gas bubbles. This information, though, can only be acquired by means of actual physiological recordings and the transmission of electronic dive data. The need to gather this information was the stimulus for the original research project called Safe Dive. Upon the success of Safe Dive, which started in 1994, establishing the Diving Safety Laboratory became a natural extension. The goal of Safe Dive was to gather data on actual diving behavior of recreational divers as well as any health or decompression-related problems following their dives, particularly in association with post-dive venous bubbles. By applying this methodology, Safe Dive was able to monitor 16,230 scuba dives. One of the important outcomes was a better understanding of the role of so-called silent or asymptomatic bubbles. Specifically, the data gathered through Safe Dive was able to establish closer relationships between the projected decompression algorithm, various ascent rates and in-water stops, and levels of post-dive venous gas bubbles. Since 1994, research conducted as part of the Safe Dive initiative discovered that there was a gradual trend in the way that recreational divers were diving. Dives were typically shallower, longer, mostly multi-level, and the interval between dives had become significantly shorter. The reasons for the change were readily apparent. Firstly, teaching methods had become more consistent as various diver training organizations had standardized the training objectives and approaches to a large extent. Secondly, the appearance of diving computers significantly affected the former square diving table-based profiles towards more multi-level ones. Thirdly, diving resorts and diving services had become more widespread throughout the world. Unlike in the pioneering days, where individuals would dive almost randomly, diving services introduced more consistent and controlled excursions, usually involving several days of diving. As part of this, the concept of a diving holiday and destinations started to take off. These typically offered relatively standardized diving packages consisting of 3 to 7 days with regular diving. The discovery of these trends prompted Dan to actively monitor this and the habits of recreational divers, so as to also prompt intervention in terms of recommending changes in diving techniques, decompression profiles, and even diving equipment. So what started as Safe Dive, with a sampling of recreational diving activities, primarily collecting electronic dive data and post-diving venous gas Doppler bubble recordings, prompted the creation of an ongoing research platform, Dan Research Diving Safety Laboratory. In its present form, the Dan Dive Safety Laboratory represents an ongoing research endeavor in diving medicine and physiology, with the objective of making scuba diving an ever safer and injury-free sport. The best quality research data can only be obtained by observing thousands of data sets, all of which reflect the actual true range of diving conditions that recreational scuba divers are encountering today. And the only way to achieve this was to actively involve the divers themselves, and giving them an active role in the research collection process. So this is where the idea of creating a specific training program originated from. The idea of training divers to record their own dives and to then donate the data to Dan Research in exchange for receiving diving safety analyses of their dives to enhance their own health, diving safety, and enjoyment. To date, the Dan DSL has accumulated extensive data on actual dives using standardized recording procedures analyzed using statistical comparisons between the predictions of established decompression algorithms and health outcomes, thereby permitting the investigation of various aspects of diving safety. So far, Dan has collected more than 60,000 monitored profiles in its database. The database now supports a detailed analysis of those dives already logged and recorded in the database, as well as providing a basis for comparing ongoing diving activities. In other words, it is possible to have an ongoing review of data, and this allows future discoveries as the lessons of the past become the diving techniques of the future. The Dan Research Diving Laboratory is an ongoing demonstration of DAN's commitment to playing an active role in advancing diving safety through high-quality research. For the purpose of clarifying terms used to describe different levels of Dan DSL collaborators, we would like to review them briefly on the slide. Firstly, there is the Dan Research Diver. This represents an individual who is simply diving and willing to contribute his or her electronic dive profiles into the Dan Europe Research Database. The submission is facilitated by Dan Research operators, which, after this course, will include you. Dan Research technicians are able to perform all the functions of a Dan Research operator, but they are also trained to record post-dive venous gas Doppler signals. The Dan Research specialist, again, can perform all the functions of the Dan Research technicians, but they are also trained to process the Doppler recordings and to upload them into the database. All these functions are coordinated by the Dan Research Regional Coordinator, who facilitates both the training and the process of data collection and the quality of the research in his or her region. The Dan Research Regional Coordinator also interfaces directly with the Dan DSL database. All of these functions fall under the supervision of the Dan Research Area Supervisor. That is a brief introduction to the history and development of Dan Europe's research program, specifically that of the ongoing Dan Diving Safety Laboratory. Thank you for your interest in this initiative and for taking the time to undergo this training.